Welcome to History Crossroads, where past meets present, and every story reveals a new path through time. Today we dive into the extraordinary life of a man who went from being a simple farmer in Tennessee to one of the most celebrated heroes of World War I. Alvin York's journey is a tale of faith, moral struggle, and courage that stands the test of time. In this episode, we'll take a deep dive into the heart of his battlefield actions and explore the internal conflict that made him the reluctant warrior who would go on to capture the imagination of a nation. Our story begins in the rural hills of Pall Mall, Tennessee, where Alvin Callum York was born in 1887. The quiet, rolling countryside surrounded his family's modest home, and York's early life was as unassuming as the landscape. By day, he worked the land to help his family survive, but by night, he was often known to join his friends at the local saloon. York's rebellious streak in his youth, marked by heavy drinking and fighting, was a sharp contrast to the man he would become. It wasn't until the death of his close friend and his own religious conversion in 1914 that York turned to a more peaceful path, embracing the teachings of his new church, which was strictly pacifist. He swore off violence, committed to living by the phrase, "Thou shalt not kill." But that vow would be put to the ultimate test when the world descended into war. Drafted into the U.S. Army in 1917, York was torn. How could a man committed to peace take up arms in the name of his country? York applied for conscientious objector status, but it was denied. Ultimately, after much reflection, York reconciled that fighting for the greater good could align with his faith, and he reported for duty with the 82nd Division. October 8, 1918. The Argonne Forest in France. Deep within enemy territory. Picture it. Thick fog rolling through the trees, the ground wet and uneven beneath the boots of exhausted soldiers. The smell of damp earth mixed with the acrid stench of gunpowder lingered in the air. Alvin York, now a corporal, found himself in the middle of one of the bloodiest battles of World War I. York and his 17-man unit were tasked with taking out a heavily fortified German machine gun nest that had pinned down their battalion. They moved cautiously through the dense forest, trying to remain unseen. But the Germans were prepared. Suddenly, a hailstorm of bullets erupted. Machine guns sprayed the area, and within minutes, many of York's comrades lay dead or wounded. Trapped in a deadly crossfire, there was no way forward, no way back. York took cover behind a fallen tree. For a moment, it seemed like the end. But something inside him stirred. He had a decision to make: stay pinned down and risk death, or act. As bullets whizzed overhead, York knew that the fate of his unit rested on his shoulders. In the chaos, he rose from cover, rifle in hand. With deadly accuracy, York began picking off the German gunners, one by one. He targeted each machine gunner, all while dodging return fire. Every shot was precise, methodical, but his rifle wasn't enough. As more German soldiers approached, bayonets fixed, York switched to his pistol. He stood alone, calmly aiming and firing, taking down anyone who got too close. His calm under pressure was almost unreal. His commanding officer would later say, quote, "It was as if York wasn't even aware of the danger around him." York continued his assault, moving closer to the German lines. At one point, a German officer charged at him with a bayonet. York stood his ground, pulling the trigger just as the officer reached him, dropping him with one shot. By now, the German forces were panicking. They believed they were under attack by the entire unit, but it was just one man. York's sheer will and fearlessness had turned the tide. Seeing no other option, the German commander made the unthinkable decision. He surrendered. York and his remaining comrades rounded up over 130 German soldiers, including officers. Imagine the scene. York, a humble man from the hills of Tennessee, leading a procession of German prisoners through the forest. The soldiers, shocked and bewildered, followed the man who had single-handedly destroyed their defenses. When York and his men returned to their battalion with the captured Germans in tow, his commanders could hardly believe what they were seeing. York had done the impossible. He had not only silenced the machine guns, but captured more enemy soldiers than anyone thought possible. For his incredible bravery, Alvin York was awarded the Medal of Honor, became an instant national hero. He was celebrated across the country, praised for his incredible actions. But York was no glory seeker. Upon returning home, York didn't seek fame or fortune. Instead, he used his newfound influence to advocate for education in his community, founding the Alvin York Institute to help poor children access schooling. Until the end of his life, York remained a humble man, devoted to his faith and to improving the lives of those around him. He saw his actions in the war not as heroism, but as a necessary evil, a burden he carried with quiet dignity. Alvin York's story is one of inner conflict, duty, and extraordinary courage. He never sought the spotlight, but his actions on that day in the Argonne Forest turned him into one of America's greatest war heroes. If you enjoyed today's episode of History Crossroads, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories from the past to life. And if you'd like early access to future episodes, exclusive content, and behind the scenes insights, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thank you for listening, and join us next time as we uncover another untold chapter in history.